I would like to think that people are responsible, but we've proven that we're not, I think. And it's going to be really hard to convince governments to make changes that are going to go against the interests of making money. And I don't think that action on climate change always loses money. There's definitely something to be said for not greenwashing, but genuine aligning of sort of technology and business and cleaning up the world and making the world better. But there are also people who I think are truly evil in that they will not hesitate to kill off the entire rest of humanity if it will make them more money before we all die, like before we leave an uninhabitable world. And like if that's not the definition of evil, I don't know what is, right? So I think that the idea of having kids essentially rioting in the streets, I don't think they're overreacting. I think they're underreacting, and they're completely within their rights. And it's also really heartening because you often hear, well, the science is complicated, but then I hear 16-year-olds sum it up very well. And so the science is not complicated. It's complicated to generate those studies. It's complicated to understand the details. But it's not complicated or difficult to understand the science at the level we need to make assessments about how screwed we are, right? So I find it really heartening that scientists have to some degree banded together with the young climate activists, and that there's been sort of a call by the younger activists to get behind the science, and I've seen a really concerted movement of scientists to get behind those activists, and I think that's a really great thing that it's managed to bridge that generational divide. And I also think it really speaks to this idea of getting people super engaged, which is another thing we need art for, or that we need literature for. Like one of the coolest things I did this year, which came at, as it always does, the busiest time of year, as I was grading everything. A friend of mine, this amazing author, Laura Lamb, she wrote a sci-fi book called Goldilocks, and she's like, yeah, I know you're really busy, but I have this deadline in 2 weeks. Could you look over the algae bit of my book? And I was just sort of, yes, please let me do something that's not grading. And something I started thinking about was the power of using storytelling and art as a way to engage people. So it wasn't important that the science in the novel be right, because I feel like once you have warp drive, you've jettisoned like sort of right, correct science, right? But simply getting the nerdy aspects of the world into a sci-fi book, or into a really great story, I think is a way to keep people engaged with it, and to keep people engaged with like the world outside them. Right? This is what art does really well, that scientists, I think, don't necessarily, it's not part of what we're trained to do. Some of us can do it, some of us can't do it. It's sort of almost irrelevant to our careers. But artists are amazing at it. It is their job, literally, to engage people and make them think about the world around them. I think doing stuff like that, so working with authors or working with artists is almost, at this point I would say it's as important as the research itself, because when I think about it, I don't want to get to the end of my career, whenever that may be, and realize I've just generated a bunch of stuff that's made no difference, except to the 10 other people in the world who think about such stuff. So I think that's a good, both from a point of view of what science does, and sort of how engaging people in terms of what's going on right now, with sort of ecological disaster. I think that's an important consideration, but also from a point of view of not just getting lost in an existential, what is it all for? Which, like when I started my PhD 20 years ago, right? I didn't have a lot of existential crises in my 20s. You sort of were confident you were going to change the world. And it was obvious what this was all for. And then you do it for 20 years and it becomes less obvious because you get tired. And it gets repetitive, and you see really great science not get used, and you see really bad science get used. And oddly enough, I think I've just become more engaged with things outside of science as I've progressed through, because of that, fairly selfish fear of not leaving anything behind that's worthwhile, right? And I think most people are motivated by that. You can sort of say it or not, but most people want to leave something behind.
That's more like a gift, in my view.
A gift or a practical joke, No?
Did I really want that?
Yeah. They left that. Oh my God. So I think that's also something that I've been doing lately, is trying really hard to think about how to get the science out there and encourage people who are getting it out there, whether that be writers or artists or really shouty 16-year-olds. I'm happy with all of those outlets.
I'm most grateful for this conversation, but particularly the way you've expressed the delight of the process of doing science itself.
Yes,
that's
sometimes delightful.
Well, it's a great gift. If that's the only thing that you leave, is an enthusiasm through your own for other people to do science, to go on these adventures. I mean, that has intrinsic value.
Well, I think science gives you the full roller coaster of experience.